We have a very important show today. I've got some, I think it's like breaking news on the health front. My guest, some of you already know, Dr. Peter McCullough. For those of you that haven't heard this before, he has 1,000 publications, 700 citations in the National Library of Medicine. He's testified before the U.S. Senate, the House of Representatives, European Parliament, state capitals on public health policy. But perhaps he's most famous because he's been on Joe Rogan and Theo Von. That's how I found out about you. My staff said, "Hey, have you seen this guy?" And my son, who's not into this at all, said, "Dad, you got to watch this guy." And I sat down. It was a long interview.
Yes. Both go for many hours. And, kids nowadays, they don't have cable TV. Right. So they are truly unplugged.
Yeah.
And so they get information through podcasts. What astounds me, and a lot of these podcasters, particularly Rogan and Von, the mean age of their listeners are in their mid-20s, Lance, and they listen for hours. What do kids nowadays ever spend hours listening to? It's stunning.
It is. Well, I think people like you and I think Joe helped to create the genre to a great degree. Jordan Peterson. If you have a meaningful conversation, people will stay. Because I was told you got to keep it short, 7 minutes, 15 minutes. I said, actually, no. If the conversation's relevant, it can go a lot longer. I have a question for you, though. I wrote it down. This ivermectin, it was shocking to me. It won the Nobel Prize in 2015. And yet it's been one of the most villainized and misunderstood. What's going on there? Is it really is it an intrusion into the pharmaceutical world that something like ivermectin can be potent and be affordable? And what's the story with that?
Ivermectin is an anti-infective, so it's an anti-parasitic agent, but it's clearly a disruptive force in medicine. Now, I've prescribed it for decades to treat parasitic infections. When I have a patient who, has some type of parasitic infection, it's always been very safe, very effective. And when the research went down in acute SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19 illness, and doctors started using it, far and away it was the most effective drug. It really was, and that was my experience. And I used all the drugs. I used plenty of hydroxychloroquine, plenty of ivermectin, plenty of Paxlovid, plenty of molnupiravir. For an oral drug, it was rapidly acting and it worked. The trick was to find out the dose. And it won the Nobel Prize because it essentially eradicated river blindness, which is a horrible parasitic infection that in these underdeveloped countries and took people's sight away. And, it's derived from the soil in Japan. So it's actually a natural byproduct, actually. And this recent discovery that it has anti-cancer effects has been amazing.
Oh, well, this is huge. So let me give you guys some data on this. You probably intuitively know it. 2,114,000 new cancer diagnoses are projected in 2026. That's about 5,800 new cases every single day. 1 in 3 Americans are going to be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. That's a shocking statistic. But you're somebody who has actually been looking at ivermectin in a meaningful role dealing with cancer. What made you sit up and say, hey, this is worth pursuing?
We were following the data. There were multiple preclinical studies that demonstrate ivermectin, because it has so many actions on cells, it appeared to have anti-cancer effects. And then a companion drug, mebendazole, had already been in study for multiple years. In fact, Johns Hopkins has a patent on the use of mebendazole in cancer. Both of these products got to the point where they started to get in these early cancer protocols. So UCLA and Cedars-Sinai has one with ivermectin in advanced breast cancer. Johns Hopkins is pursuing mebendazole in brain cancer because it penetrates into the brain. What we did at the Wellness Company is we have a combination product. It's used on label to treat what's called neglected parasite infections. But we did an intake form and we followed patients and we said, listen, if you're going to use this for cancer, in addition to all the standard surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, tell your doctors about it. We'll monitor this, and we're going to check in 6 months, and we were amazed with what we found.
All right, well, tell me about the study. What was the scope of the study?
The scope involved patients, and 122 so far have passed the 6-month mark out of 200. And the most common cancer was prostate cancer in men, breast cancer in women, lung cancer in both, and then much less other cancers. So they're mainly solid organ cancers. about a third had metastatic disease. So the cancer was already on the move. And it's what's called patient-reported outcomes. So the patients report to us what's happened. Now, most are getting scans and blood tests every 3 months. The first thing to discuss is safety. 25% of patients said they had some side effects, most commonly gastrointestinal side effects, which is what we expected. No serious adverse events. And then in terms of efficacy, 84% had a clinical benefit. Either the cancer stayed the same in about a third, it actually regressed in nearly 20%. We saw lesser, manifestations of disease progression. And then, and this is a real world study, 16% said, my cancer got worse. And so that tells us the patients were not, interjecting their bias. So we can see the results. They were up on the screen. I just
put the results. There we go. Okay, thank you.
So there we go. You can see those overall fractions. This is so blockbuster and so encouraging. I mean, my messaging in the major media is that, listen, this is right over the plate for Robert F. Kennedy, Health and Human Services, National Cancer Institute. Go with a large, prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. There can be some dose-ranging aspects of it. Our dose is probably low. Hopkins is with membenazole is looking at 500 as the lowest dose. Our lowest dose right now is 250. We can advance to 500 easily. But this is right there. This is this Make America Healthy Again. And we hope they pick up on it, because I can tell you cancer centers have incentives, unfortunately, to stick to the expensive forms of chemo.
Well, that's what brought you, I think, to a national platform, and that you're one of those advocates for be an informed person and make your own choices on these things. Is it accurate to say that 72% of users reported positive outcomes?
84%.
84%.
Remember, positive is the cancer not growing or advancing. So it's 84%. I mean,
how does ivermectin and mebendazole, do they combine together in a unique way, or is it just they do two different things and they both work well together?
They hit multiple actions on the cancer cell. There's certain actions where the cancer cell has to assemble tubules inside itself to double in cancer cells. So mebendazole is locking that down. Ivermectin is working through a whole series of other mechanisms. But, remember, when people have cancer, and anybody listening to this knows about this, the cancer chemotherapy is typical multiple different drugs because you have to hit cancer in many ways. With ivermectin and mebendazole, there's probably at least 6 different ways cancer cells are hit. And when you have that much medicinal force against a cancer cell, chances are the cancer cell will give up, or the body's immune system will step in and start to clear it out. Remember, cancer is always at war with our own immune system.
All right, so here's the million-dollar question. People discover they have a cancer situation, like 1 in 3 I'm looking at here. Is there a preemptive benefit to this in order to kind of protect you from getting it, or is there any?
It's possible. That wasn't studied. There are many medicinal and culinary herbs, believe it or not, natural products that probably are preventive.
For instance, when you're talking,
a good one is curcumin, derived from turmeric. The data are amazing.
Get out.
And the Indian Asian societies that use a lot of this, they have statistically lower rates of certain cancer.
Come on.
Yeah, another one is cruciferous vegetables. Lance, do you eat your broccoli and asparagus? I'm telling you, it has anti-cancer effects.
Bring it down. Cruciferous. What does that mean for
cruciferous is
for the fast food crowd?
It's a branch of vegetables like kale, broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. It has anti-cancer effects. That whole class.
My gosh. I'm gonna.
So take some notes. But the point is, just like we have a heart healthy diet, we can actually have a cancer prevention diet.
Yes, I guess that's where I'm going.
Yeah, and I think, will we ever get to drugs that can prevent cancer? It would be desirable. Right now we don't have them. But I think nutraceuticals and supplements play a role. I mean, there are those interested in saying, listen, we can give higher doses of these. You almost can't eat enough turmeric to get the curcumin intake, to that level.
Right.
So many in the natural world are, interested in this. You mentioned 2 million new cancer patients. The total, prevalence pool of cancer in the United States is 20 million Americans. And if you look at assignment of mortality, about 40% of us die of heart disease, 40% of us die of cancer, and 20% die of other causes. Well, if we're in good shape like you and I are, Lance, and we're eating carefully and jogging, we're probably not going to die of heart disease. So relatively, that opens up a bigger window for cancer.
Right. All right. I had a graphic up earlier. Let's bring that up. I want you to explain it. You know what we're looking at. You put it up a moment ago. What? All right. So what is this?
This is what our patients told us at the wellness company. So they started ivermectin and benzoyl. Most took 1 tablet a day, 25 and 250 milligrams respectively of the 2 drugs. Some took 1 twice a day. I advise my patients to take 1 twice a day. 32% had no recurrent evidence of disease. 15.6%, it actually regressed. There was evidence based on scans that metastases improved. 36.1, it had already progressed, but it was stable. And then 15.6, sadly, it worsened. And these are very believable real-world outcomes. People have criticized and said, well, you don't have all the scans yet. You don't have all the blood work. I mean, that's a whole nother level of investigation that's needed. And, I think that's perfect for the National Cancer Institute.
So, explain to us what chemotherapy is by comparison to this.
Chemotherapy, in many ways, unfortunately, has disappointing results. So, in many forms of chemotherapy, there is this, reduction in tumor progression. So everybody's progressing in terms of their cancer getting worse, but it's a lesser degree of progression.
I see. Okay.
Unless in certain cancers, like leukemia in a child, and they get hit hard with chemo and they're cured. That's possible. Or in the case of, let's say, a female pelvic tumor where the vast majority of the tumor is removed, and then it's chemo to just kind of theoretically handle any microspread. Or that's common in breast cancer, for instance, as well. Many times, people look at that and say, listen, the chemo is just for theoretical spread. All the tumor is out of my body, so we don't really know if the chemo is actually doing anything.
What is the bottle you have there on the desk in front of you? What are we looking at there?
This is the ultimate spike detox from the wellness company. This is the most widely used product to help handle this spike protein that we've all gotten. So here's a model of the virus. You and I have had COVID. We didn't take the vaccines, but we recognize many people did. But whether you had the virus or took the vaccines, this part of the virus gets stuck in the human body. And one of my patients in Dallas here, we've measured spike protein circulating in his bloodstream 3.6 years after taking the shots. So no wonder people feel sick after COVID-19 and after the vaccines. Some people retain the spike protein. This has nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin, 4 minor ingredients that helps dissolve the spike protein and have people clear up their symptoms.
So people that didn't take the shot, are they still exposed to the possibility of spike protein?
Yeah, if they've had the infection, particularly in 2020 when it was more severe, there's a way to measure it on a blood test to see if you have any risk. And fortunately, LabCorp offers this without a doctor's order. So you can go into LabCorp. You can go online and go to LabCorp, Labs on Demand, click infectious diseases and immunity, COVID-19 antibody test, pay $69, go into LabCorp, get your blood test. If the result comes back less than 1,000, every study shows that it's just residual antibody, there's no more spike, you're good. More than 5,000, our research program has shown there's probably some spikes in the bloodstream. More than 10,000, 15,000, people are in trouble.
Well, I know there's something about this shedding language because my son didn't take the vaccine and he went into the doctor and came up with a spike protein in his system. So there you go. He was saying,
yeah,
how did I get that? I said, well, maybe there is some picking it up from people that have it, right?
Right. So Helene Benoon, a former INSERM researcher from France, has published the most on this. For sure, shedding, which may just be spike transference of spike exposure, occurs from young women to young women in the premenopausal years, for sure. Because someone who took a vaccine, for instance, can go be among other women who didn't take a vaccine, and their periods change.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's been well reported. Big UK project called the EVA project. Meaningful shedding between people on airplanes, what have you. It may just be an immune re-challenge, but people definitely report it.
Hey, Chelsea, put back up. What did you have up there? Is there a way people can get a hold of this? LanceWallnau.com/medical.
Yeah,
use the promo code Lance. Just put Lance in, you get 10% off. Thanks for offering us that.
Yeah, Lance has a good code. Most people need the ultimate spike detox. It's very important. 2 capsules twice a day is the labeled amount. Under doctor's direction, severe cases, I advance to 4 capsules twice a day. Must be on an empty stomach. Take it with food, it doesn't work. It's in enzymes, and they partially get absorbed into the GI tract. But we've published this, Lance. The antibody levels to the spike protein, and when we can measure spike protein, they reliably go down with this. It takes about a year or longer, but people need to know they need to do this. The only other method we know about that gets rid of spike protein, believe it or not, is sweating. It comes out in sweat. Both the vaccine and spike come out in sweat. So we tell people, listen, you're out here in beautiful Keller, Colleyville, get out there and jog around your palatial estate here and sweat. Now, if you can't sweat, we tell people, listen, get saunas, infrared saunas and others. They're very affordable. You can get them on Amazon. Set up a little teepee and go sweat this stuff out.
Believe it or not, my wife has an infrared sauna. So she's always experimenting with everything.
No wonder she looks so beautiful. I was wondering.
That explains the secret.
Yes. Amazing.
Long youth. All right, so you also have 2 books there, and I'm a student of yours. So what have we got there? We got vaccines.
That's
a big subject. Every mom I know is asking me questions that I can't answer about.
Right. So this is Vaccines: Mythology, Ideology, Reality. The lead author is John Leake. He's right here in Dallas. John's considered the world's greatest historian currently, and he's been in Washington. He was recently there in Washington for a big group for Robert F. Kennedy, and this is a gripping historical narrative on the development of vaccines, how we got to this craziness of the COVID-19 vaccines, where are the pitfalls, the false claims, and I think everybody, just as a general historical mind, who was Louis Pasteur? Who was Edward Jenner? How did this all happen? What happened with the U.S. Army and the anthrax vaccine debacle, and on and on. So this is not a boring medical book. It made the New York Times bestseller list in about 30 days, which is really unheard of. And it's not an anti-vaccine book. It points out that there are, realities, these benefits of vaccines, but it gives people, it's not a guidebook on what parents should do, but it's historically very accurate and well written. And I'll say one more thing. Since this is in part a religious show.
Yes, we are a largely Christian audience, although I do have some other people.
A key part of this, Lance, is the word ideology, of how vaccines, in a sense, have become a religion. And we had to pick somewhere to start. We saw some evidence of experimentation in Egypt and in Turkey, but we actually started the book in 1721 in Boston, Massachusetts, when smallpox was advancing there. And the character we chose to start with, a Puritan minister, Cotton Mather, one of the intellectuals of the day, 1721. He was working with another doctor there, Dr. Boylston. And of note, Cotton Mather was such an enthusiast of early vaccination called variolation used with a scalpel, because they didn't have hypodermic needles back then. He declared that it was a gift from God. He declared, this is 1721, that this process of man conferring immunity against an advancing disease was a gift that God gave us. And then we take it all the way to the front cover. And the front cover is a coin. It's actually an actual coin that was issued by the Pope in 2022. It's a 20-euro coin. And it's the classic tripartite depiction of a boy about to receive the Eucharist.
Oh, wow.
But instead, he's receiving a COVID vaccine. So what we saw through COVID is almost the replacement of Christ with a COVID shot. That's what the imagery tells us.
Right.
Astonishing.
No, it is astonishing. That's what got me particularly was, who was the Yuval Harari, the Israeli kind of atheist who was a large part of the Davos crowd, and he made this observation. I thought it was so brazen, but it got my attention. He said that science is the new religion.
Yes.
Because the men in the white coats could shut down synagogues, churches, and mosques when COVID came, they became the authorities on what you do. And he boldly says, so science is therefore the new religion. I thought, man, it's almost treated that way.
Yes. And, Francis Collins, who is Dr. Fauci's boss, he's written books that, his work with DNA and genetics is learning the language of God, that he himself has grown closer to God. And you remember Fauci when he famously said, I am science. So in our book, we capture all this hubris, this bold claim, and how the ideology goes. The tautology is like this, that mankind is susceptible to infectious illnesses. It's a weakness that we have. But through the brilliance of science and vaccinology, man can improve upon God's creation, that scientists outdo God.
Right.
But for this to work, the vaccines aren't perfect. So for this to work, everyone must take them. And if some people are injured or disabled or sadly lose their life with this adventure, they should take that for the betterment of humanity. That started with smallpox and Edward Jenner. It went all the way up. I mean, parents were put in jail in around 1890 or so in Boston, Toronto, and UK if their kids didn't take a smallpox vaccine. And it wasn't sterile. Kids were dying of too much smallpox. It was a live virus, or they were dying of tetanus or syphilis in the injection. Oh, it was awful. So the book is really, everybody needs to get a copy of this to understand. I mean, we believe what we saw through COVID had to have a historical basis, and indeed it does. The second book took place almost exclusively in Dallas. And so this is Courage to Face COVID-19. This is really my story of how I developed the first multi-drug treatment protocol for COVID, the most widely deployed approach worldwide, credited with saving tens of millions of lives, sparing hundreds of millions of hospitalizations. How did this get all the way to the floor of the U.S. Senate and Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and set them off in directions? I feel partly responsible that Tucker's not on Fox News anymore, because after my interview with him, he started going on about vaccines. Same thing with Joe Rogan. For a while, he was kind of threatened about a Spotify contract because we had exposed this. But the story goes on. It's a gripping narrative. One of the heroes in the book is Ron Johnson in the U.S. Senate.
And what did he do?
He's a real statesman. He was the first to say, listen, it's 2020. Our government's doing nothing for sick people at home. There must be solutions. I want to hear from doctors who are treating patients in the field. Fauci never asked for that. And I give Johnson a lot of credit.
And you were actually, I think, shuffled off the stage when you started talking about preventative steps you could take. I mean, you really got in the way of progress there, because everybody was moving full scale, warp speed with pharmaceutical solutions. And you were saying, hey, what about, I remember that was the last time I saw you at a White House event. What about preventing and intercepting this thing from the beginning?
Right. And what happened, and we capture this, is that the Federal Trade Commission, towards the end of 2019 and 2020, put out a COVID misinformation policy for anybody in the natural and nutraceutical world to follow. That you could be accused of spreading misinformation with your products or your website. So who did they go after? They went after one of the major purveyors of vitamin D. Imagine vitamin D. Every single study showed vitamin D was preventive in acute COVID-19. It reduced the intensity and severity of illness. There were blood levels that were correlated to protection, and on and on. And a major purveyor of vitamin D was sued by the Federal Trade Commission for a huge amount of money, drug them through the courts, massive legal fees and what have you, to just disable a vitamin D conversation in COVID. And then the most heinous was actually an attack against Nate Jones, the CEO of Clear Company, XLEAR, and the company itself, because he was doing prospective randomized trials of nasal sprays and throat sprays and gargles to prevent COVID-19, and it worked.
And it worked. The iodine, for instance.
And he has some products that his main basis is xylitol and grapefruit seed extract. But the point is, when we look back now, normal saline works, dilute iodine works, xylitol works. And he was just putting the study results on his website. And, they drug him through the courts. It cost him and his company millions of dollars. And he just kept fighting and changing attorneys. And then when Trump came into power for the second term, Trump fired 2 people at the top of the FTC. And then Nate got a letter saying, we're dropping everything. So I'm telling you, our U.S. government suppressed simple, safe, over-the-counter solutions that could have prevented severe illness.
I don't think our trust in government or in science has been increased as a result of the whole. I think we have more. That's why MAHA is such a popular political thing. Are you satisfied with some of the progress that Kennedy's been making on that?
It's been partial, but I concur with your conclusion that trust is lost. I mean, this most recent thing of Bill Gates, who's been a big vaccine promoter, that he was colluding with Jeffrey Epstein on creating a pandemic that would make us miserable. I mean, people's trust is plummeted.
Which introduces something here. Tell me about the wellness company. I'm covering everything you've got there because I don't know when I'm going to get you back in the studio. The wellness company medical emergency kit. What are we talking about here?
We saw through the pandemic, we talked about ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or prednisone, or we could go on and on. The pharmacies were blocking drugs to patients. So doctors would prescribe a drug. The pharmacist said, I'm not going to dispense it. This was stunning. This never happened before. Wellness company, we formed it in 2022. I'm one of the founding people. I'm the chief scientific officer of the company. And we said, what? We're making kits. We're going to work with the FDA. We're going to pre-prescribe these drugs legally, supply people with them, give them a handbook, telemedicine backup if they needed. Somebody gets acutely ill with a COVID-19 infection or a bronchitis pneumonia, urinary tract infection, yeast infection. They can manage it themselves at home. This is very important. And they can go through this just fine. Remember, these infections are so easy to treat early. But if you wait a week or 2 weeks and then go to urgent care, you're deep into an infection.
Right.
And you go to urgent care nowadays, Lance, it's like $1,200, $1,500 to go to urgent care. Right. You can buy an emergency medical kit for a couple $100 with the promo code Lance. Take 10% off that, take $20 off.
Yeah.
It's so worth it. People are getting kits. And you know what? You're traveling. You don't want to go to an urgent care if you get a bladder infection or if your wife gets a bladder infection. It's so important.
You have a little booklet with it, right? And the booklet, I mean, let's face it, there's certain professions that like to keep things complicated so that you're stuck with them. What you do is you demystify, and pretty much it's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of the common things that people are dealing with can be covered and properly analyzed just by knowing here's what my symptoms are, and you go through and you can come up with a solution, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, how many times have people gotten food poisoning? They start vomiting and having diarrhea at the same time, and you can't stop it? Oh, my Lord. And then once the body gets dehydrated, that makes more nausea. So it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. So drugs like Zofran or ondansetron that's in the kits is a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many times my wife has gotten into some predicament and she goes, my God, if I didn't have that, I'd have to go to the ER. Same thing with uncontrollable diarrhea. So you need some things on hand that can help with these symptoms. And I can tell you, influenza, real influenza for a senior citizen can be severe, and it's immediately treatable on the first day with oseltamivir. Every study shows that. Now you wait 5 days, it doesn't work. So you have to start early. The only way to do that, you can't get a doctor's appointment that quickly. You go to urgent care, it's like a day sometimes in urgent care. The emergency room's worse.
And of course, you're hanging around with a whole bunch of really sick people. That's really a positive aspect of what, when I go, it's really motivating me. So we opened the program talking about, I think it's what's in the kit right here that Chelsea gave me. This is the ivermectin and mebendazole. mebendazole, compound formula.
Right. Why don't you show that? That's actually not in the kit. That's sold separately. You have to have approval. But why don't you show the bottle so people can see the ivermectin mebendazole? That's what it looks like. So for those with neglected parasite infections or they have cancer and they're considering, through shared decision-making with their doctors, taking an additional step, Wellness Company offers it. Get ivermectin mebendazole. A lot of people do this, honestly. They do it for their loved ones and say, listen, give it a shot.
Right.
This is very safe. We don't know. You're doing everything else, right? You've already had the surgery. You've done radiation and chemotherapy, and it's so much angst. My brother-in-law has had cancer for a long time, and he said to me one time, it stuck in my head, Lance, he said, when you have cancer, there's not a day in your life where you don't think about it.
Right. And if you're taking care of somebody with cancer, there's not a day that you're not thinking about them.
You don't think about it, so why not do everything? We've shown the positive data. We strongly encourage, and we've sent our results to the National Cancer Institute. They pick up the ball and do large trials, but right now it's generic. It's in a very safe and acceptable combination, and it is FDA approved for another indication. It is perfectly fine for a clinically indicated, medically necessary off-label use of a drug. That's perfectly fine. We do that in medicine all the time.
Now, I think my office said that if we can get the lancewallnau.com/medical, you can get ivermectin.
Yes, you can get it through the website. Again, a lot of people just want a supply of that alone.
Right.
So Wellness Company, we have our own pharmacies, and so we control our own destiny here. We don't have.
And you're growing here in Dallas, right?
Mm-hmm. Opening up a big office here in Dallas. We're hiring, so go on LinkedIn and Lori Brander's our HR leader. Wellness Company is probably the most exciting, successful corporate story to emerge from the pandemic. I mean, we started off, we had 6 months where we lost money. We've had, after 6 months, every month it's progressively more income and revenue. You can't beat a successful corporate story.
No, it's brilliant. Now, I got to ask you this because I have you here in the studio. What is long COVID? Is it real? And what's the solution for it? Because I run into people that are always saying, I'm going, wow, is that really what that is? Long COVID?
It's becoming less frequent, thank goodness. It's still about 5 to 10% of people, typically those who had severe illness early in the pandemic or have multiple episodes. It's the spike protein, the little part of it sticks in the body and makes people feel bad. Post-exertional malaise, brain fog, generally feeling unwell. It doesn't get better, in my experience, until they go on the ultimate spike detox and begin to get this stuff out of the body. Sauna and sweating helps greatly. Everything else can be added, but we don't want to skip the ultimate spike detox. I've seen people go to Mexico for stem cell treatments and do all this stuff. I said, listen, it's not going to work unless you get this out of your body.
Get that out, right?
Yeah.
Gosh. So so I can't believe I've run out of time. This is a fast interview. This always happens when you're in here. But you really do treat the subject of medicine as though people can be educated and make wise choices.
For sure.
That's different than a lot of medical professionals who like to just kind of tell you what you need to go take. You seeing a change in that? Obviously, your company's growing because people are saying, no, I'm going to take charge of my own health.
Right, that's the message. Remember, doctors don't make people well. People themselves create their wellness. Doctors are there to solve problems when problems occur. So the health and wellness field is growing. I think everybody ought to make it a hobby to be as healthy and fit as possible. It goes along with a strong belief in strong religious belief, and that's true in Christianity and so many other religions. So it does comport very well with what many of us aspire to do in our lives.
Well, you've made a big impact on us, and we appreciate so much what you've contributed. If they want to know about your clinic here in Dallas, how do they find out about it?
Go to my personal website, professional website, petermcculloughmd.com. I'm at LBJ in Preston. I will be relocating an office within the Wellness Company headquarters, and that's at 75 in Gallatin, over on Renner Parkway. But I see patients with internal medicine, cardiology problems, largely from the vaccines and from the infection now. And so it's heart damage, blood clots. People have really been severely affected.
And it's for real, the blood clots and all that?
Oh, it's as real as every
Are
day.
there any studies coming out to prove that, or, to give any?
Believe it or not, there's been thousands of studies, and it's largely been suppressed in the mainstream media. The spike protein is physically in the blood clots. It's physically in the heart. It's been physically found in ruptured blood vessels in the brain. It is the cause of the problem.
Wow.
And we have to light a fire among our government leaders to, help us study this spike protein. We've all been poisoned by this virus out of Wuhan, China. Whether we had the virus, which 90% of people have, or have taken a vaccine. In the United States, 81% took that. And sadly, because the vaccines don't work, people have had both.
81% took the vaccine?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm hanging out with the 20%, I guess, is into it. It's my group. Well, Doc, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to having you back again. And I'm going to have a lot of questions people are going to send me, so we'll get you back if you don't mind. All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Peter McCullough, God bless.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.